Good evening, everyone, and welcome along to this evening's England Football Learning webinar. The topic of tonight's webinar is looking at how we might create and maintain a thriving learning environment. So for the next 90 minutes, we'll be discussing what this might look like across different contexts and hopefully give you guys lots of takeaways to bring into your own environments as well. My name is Conal. I'll be your host this evening. It's my pleasure to be joined by Laws, Wendy and Andre as well. So as always in these webinars, we'll be covering three themes across the course of this evening. The first theme will be looking at understanding what a safe and inclusive environment looks like. We'll then dive into a bit of detail on what recognizing good coaching practice when working with neurodiverse players is. And then finally, we'll wrap that up in terms of looking at how we might develop a thriving learning environment across training and match day in the different contexts that you guys as learners operate. Cool. So without further ado, we will get cracking into our first theme, which is understanding what a safe and inclusive environment looks like.
Once we have clear set boundaries, we can be protected. We don't ever have to feel that there's someone doing more than they should be doing, someone saying stuff that they shouldn't be doing. And I think that's just got to be set from the outset. But then again, being open and approachable means that if it does ever get crossed over, you can approach someone, discuss it, and it will be addressed. So I think that's so important to make sure that all environments, wherever you're working, is safe.
I think I've read some bits about people being themselves and it's just that, not being judged, being there at the session and knowing that they can wholly be themselves and they're not going to be judged for how they act maybe a little bit differently or associate themselves with different things to others. And then building that trust through consistent support.
If we start to look now at what an inclusive environment might look and feel like.
Those are the things where it's those small things as a coach, as a club, as an environment that you can kind of create, which allows people to feel welcome. It allows people to feel that they are meant to be there. And I think the other thing which would add to that is making sure that they have a voice and they have a choice. When you think of the sound of football, you usually hear coaches giving orders. Well, how important is it, especially if we're talking about making decision makers in the players that we work with, how important is it to make sure that they have a voice and they're not just saying something for you to say, no, we're not going to go with that. You actually embrace it.
Just listen to you speak there. There's also an element of when new players arrive at a session or a young person arrives or an adult arrives for the very first time, sometimes we can just take it for granted that they will go and join in with an arrival activity or go and join in with the game. And that's kind of their welcome to the group, but sometimes we have to be more purposeful about that. The club that I work at, when players come in on trial, as an example, they get a tour of the training ground on their first evening, and 2 or 3 players from the group will be the ones to do that tour along with a member of staff. But we think it's really important to have the other players in the group involved in that as well and kind of be that first welcome. So it's really important to consider that regardless of the context you're coaching in.
Making sure they know what to expect. And really, know who they're going to be greeted by, how many other children are going to be there, what type of stuff they're going to be doing. And it can just really help, especially a neurodivergent young child, to get to that first session, which might really be a massive challenge to actually get there in the first place. And I know I've seen it with my own son where he's maybe displayed some behaviours that's showing that he doesn't actually want to be there, he doesn't want to go. But actually 2 sessions in, it's the best thing that he's ever done. But the behaviours that you see initially is saying that, why have you brought this child down here? He obviously doesn't want to be here. So yeah, I think the welcome before the welcome's a big thing as well.
For some players that I've worked with in the past, especially with players with autism, they need that process of what's going to happen from the minute they arrive, who they're going to be playing with, what the activities we're going to do. So it allows them to process that information and, links to my point around working with parents and carers is really important, especially with the multicultural environments we work with. We've got to embrace everyone's differences that come to our football sessions, whether they're kids, whether they're adults, and it's really important that we get to know them as a person first and what drives them and what makes them want to come to football. Is it driven that they want to become a professional football player, they want to represent their country, or is it that they want to have a good experience for their community and, they're happy to take part in physical activity? So some of the work that I've done, and even currently, when we're doing our team talk, don't feel that you can't bring the parents in, get them involved. And linking back to the point before around that safe environment, it can't just be you as a coach to make sure that environment's safe. So encourage your parents to help out, get them to be vigilant for you, but at the same time, how can you involve them in the decisions that you're making as a coach, and that's really vital.
Relationship and that trust goes a very long way in being able to help coach and help correct behaviours or correct techniques and things within football.
I think you've got to be intentional with it. As you said, it's difficult where packing up, you might have someone that's ready to go into the pitch. As soon as you're ready, half the players could already be there. There might be a time where you might have felt the session wasn't as good as you wanted to, so you're kind of in your own thoughts and feelings. But I think you've got to recognise that you're ultimately there for the players. So being intentional and finding time to speak to them. Now, there's so many different ways you can do it. You can do it whilst you're part of their arrival activity. They can come over, they can share some information with you. But for that to happen, as you said, the environment has to be there. So you have to be that open and approachable coach where they want to come and tell you something.
Cool. We're going to move on to our second theme of the evening now, which is looking at good coaching practice when working with neurodiverse players. And we had loads of questions about this, both when people were signing up for the webinar and also in the chat box this evening. So hopefully we'll be able to shed a light on that for you. The first thing we're going to do is look at defining what neurodiversity is. And I'm not going to read out the slide for you, but essentially the difference, neurodiversity is the difference in the way that people process things and process what they see, hear, feel, smell, and taste. So that's a difference that exists between us as humans. So someone who is neurodivergent, when we describe someone as being neurodivergent, that essentially means that they will think, feel, learn, and process information in a different way to others, or in a way that's outside of societal norms. So we're going to use the word neurodivergent quite a lot this evening. So I just thought it would be helpful to frame that as a definition to start. In terms of types of neurodivergence, some of these you will have heard of and will have come across before. Some you might not have. Tonight's webinar is not long enough for us to dive into all of these, and we're certainly not experts in every single one of them. But tonight we will be spending some time diving into ADHD and autism, because they're probably two of the more common ones that we experience, and also they were the ones that a lot of people asked questions about. Even when we were getting questions for tonight's webinar, there was some around like, how do we deal with disruptive players, or how do we deal with players who never listen? And what I just kind of want you to think about right now is, when you use these words or use these phrases to describe a player's behavior, we need to go a level deeper than that. So we need to start understanding what might sit behind their behavior.
Two of the players have swimming before they get to me. I know two others have swimming on a Wednesday, so they have a late night, and three others have an after school club till 5 o'clock, and they come to training at 6. So already there's loads of different things that have, you don't know what's happened even before they've got to me at 6 o'clock. And myself as a coach, there might be a day where I've driven for 3 hours to get back for training. So there's loads of different perspectives that we need to put into place. So, what's really important is that if you're working with someone else, that you take these into consideration, that you've got to help each other. And essentially that's even before the ball's been kicked.
My child used to hate being touched, but it was that unexpected touch. So in the game of football, it's okay because it's expected and you can see. But for example, a celebration, so someone jumping on his back to go well done, then that would just like, get off, do not touch me. It just wouldn't be accepted by him, and he might run off. But to build for those young people to build relationships, or adults, sorry, I keep saying young people, but to build relationships in those moments, it's really difficult. So I think if we can't help people understand what's sitting maybe behind the behavior, then it's going to be really difficult for those young people to feel accepted and to build relationships with the rest of the team. So that's why it's so important that we understand the young person as an individual and those traits and those different behaviors that we might see.
I think there's a young player in my group that I coach who is autistic and also has ADHD as well. And I remember the very first session I ever coached with him, we were doing like a simple possession practice, and about halfway through the practice he's just walked off and gone and sat down on the floor at the side of the pitch. And my initial reaction was kind of to stop the practice and go, you can't just walk off in the middle of a practice. You must come back in and join in now, because I am the coach and I'm the boss. And then subsequently getting to know him and working with him, him removing himself from the session was him self-regulating and him going, I just need a moment now to just chill out, calm down, recalibrate and step back in. So yeah, like you just said, that the importance of not assuming, and that was a moment where I did assume and kind of went, oh well, I've always reacted like that if a player's walked out of a practice or a session. So yeah, really good to reflect on these moments as well.
Player passport obviously is something that we've introduced in the last few years. One, just to kind of get a bit more information about your players individually. What's really important is that it's, again, utilizing parents, carers to help, give that information. Like Wendy said, like not all parents will want to share information, but it's a start. I did this with our under sevens just to kind of get to know everyone, and there was some really vital information that helped us. One of the things that came back, I remember in the first, this was 3 weeks into knowing the players, was what makes me happy. You'll know that I won't be biting my bib. So there's a kid in my team who always bites his bib. So we noticed that if we don't give him a bib, it got him to, his attention was a bit better. So, it allows us to also, get the players to fill it in as well. So it was a good way for them to kind of create their passport. We laminated the passports and then we had them in our kind of coaching packs. And going back to that, working with other coaches, it allowed us, at times, especially in that first year of football, where it was playing different teams, playing at a venue where, there's a referee. So for the kids, it was overstimulating for them. So it allowed us to, when we go to play other teams, to go, look, here are some needs that we need to consider.
Like I said earlier, we're going to dive into ADHD and autism in a little bit more detail. Not in any, we could fill loads of webinars about this subject, but we haven't got the time to do that tonight. So it will be a whistle-stop tour. This is a question from Jeanette. I don't know if Jeanette is on the call this evening, but she sent in a question when she signed up asking if we had any advice on how to support an autistic player during training. These are some considerations that you might want to look into when supporting an autistic player. We will highlight some more examples later on in the slides. Panel, I don't know from your experiences if there's anything that jumps out to you here as something that's worked well for you, or something that's been a key part of your kind of coaching toolbox, I guess, when working with autistic players.
So what are you asking of them? Don't expect them to maybe get it straight away. It might be that they need to just process that information to understand what you've asked. Preparing them what to expect, and we've talked about that with the whiteboards and showing that. Understanding how they present their emotions and how they best regulate. And something, Conal, you mentioned about that boy going off and regulating. Something I saw at a session last week was blue bibs. They had blue bibs around the pitch, and it was for players to pick up and walk off with. And the coach knew if they took the blue bib, it's because they needed a moment. And they were going off and they were going to sit themselves down somewhere, or they're going to walk off, or they're going to dribble the ball off. And that was the first time I'd seen that. And I thought that was quite a nice thing that they did. But everyone knew about it. So it was like, okay, he needs a little bit of time, or she needs a little bit of time, and we'll give them that. And then we'll go and approach and see how they are.
We'll move on to ADHD, and Andre, I promise I'll come to you on that one so you can chip in. In terms of ADHD, some of the general characteristics, something might be an impulsiveness, so players may act without thinking and look as though they're ignoring the rules, like the example that I gave. Hyperactivity, so it might be that players may need to move more often when you call the group in. They may struggle with standing still and kind of listening to your information. And inattentiveness as well, so they may have a short attention span, potentially be easily distracted, or they may look as though they're ignoring you when being spoken directly to. Question from Marlon. Marlon, I'm not sure if you're on the call tonight, but thanks for submitting your question. How do you support a young player with ADHD who can be very enthusiastic and sometimes potentially disruptive during training? So these are some of the considerations. Andre, I'll come to you first.
I think it's really interesting, because when we're speaking about the things that's worked for me, is the things that I think we normally would do as coaches. It's just about having that understanding that you're supporting an individual, or you're supporting the neurodiverse players. But it's about just making sure that it's the common thing. And I'm not going to say normal thing, the common thing, which just happens in practices. So as Wendy spoke about the blue bibs, now that's not just for your neurodiverse players. I could have absolutely got smashed in a tackle, and I know I need time to walk off before I react in a certain way. But because that is the common thing, I can also pick up a blue bib and then walk off. And I think when it's set in that type of environment, it allows you to then be able to dip in and support certain players in certain ways. Your environment will support you in doing that. So again, if you're speaking about players that might have ADHD and they're a bit more hyperactive, then for me, that's just the case of looking yourself as a coach, and can you be concise and precise, and can you recognize that you might need to get your messages over a little bit quicker, a little bit snappier, just so then they're not essentially being bored.
Kind of going back to the player passport, so understanding what they like. Obviously, you're there to develop players. You want them to get better, but how can you work on their super strengths? So for me, like, you know, using the step principle is really important. So how do you modify the tasks to really, you know, if you've got one player that, you know, has ADHD, and, you know, how can you set them individual challenge to really get them focused in that session? So, you know, I've worked with players before with ADHD and they just need a focus, but that focus isn't for the full session. It might be for that next minute and a half. I used to say, right, I've got my coaching goggles. I'm going to watch you for the next minute and a half. So for me, utilizing step principle is really important. And, you know, if you've got players that want touches on the ball, that love doing certain activities, how can you put them in positions where they get a lot of repetition on that, so their concentration stays really high?
Creating a safe space. A safe space is an area players can go to if they feel they need to be distracted or time to regulate their emotions. Setting this safe space away from your main pitch can help every player feel comfortable, unpressured and secure whenever the needs arises. Using their safe space. Within their safe space, you can include a fidget bag containing fidget and sensory toys. These help players feel calm if they become stressed and better able to regulate their emotions before they rejoin the session. Another idea is to suggest an alternative individual activity with or without the ball in the safe space. Or you could suggest doing something completely different based on what you know about each individual player's interests. Making your instructions really clear. Another really helpful resource is First and Then. This provides a visual cue when introducing new activities or instructions. It does so in a way that children understand and helps motivate them to join in. It helps create a structured and predictable environment for your players by clearly explaining what they're doing now and what they'll be doing next. First and Then will help calm players who are keen to play a particular game and who might struggle to wait when you have another part of the session to cover first. Using First and Then. First and Then helps players understand the short-term activities by breaking down your instructions. An example of this could be first dribbling, then you can have a drink. Or first warm up, then passing. You can extend this technique to first, then and last, using the whiteboard to explain what they need to do, breaking down instructions even more. For example, this could be first, listen to what I'm asking you to do, then watch me demonstrate it, last, do it yourself. First, then and last also works well when a player is feeling unsettled. For example, this could be first, go to the safe space until you feel comfortable, then rejoin the session when you're ready, last, enjoy yourself. Using your emotion cards. Emotion cards help you understand how players are feeling and their mood when they arrive. Allowing them to communicate their emotions will help you recognise which players may become dysregulated throughout the session as you learn about each individual player's emotions and understanding. Building up a player's confidence in expressing their feelings means they'll know they can reach out for support if they need it. Emotion cards will help make your sessions a safe and secure space for them to communicate how they feel. Getting players involved. You may find some players don't want to join in and are avoiding taking part. If this happens, you can allow them to just watch, suggest they play outside with parent or carer, buddy with another player who is more confident, ask if they would like to try and join in now and again throughout the session to remind them they are welcome to play. It's always a good idea to give unsettled players some time and space. It allows them to regulate their emotions and behaviour.
There's a massive impact that we can have here as coaches, and if we work towards becoming neuro-inclusive, and that is being inclusive of players who are neurodivergent, it can have a massive impact. So it can support players to improve their focus, confidence and understanding, and that has an impact not only in football but in their lives away from football too. Could be in school, could be in work. It can really help them connect with their teammates and reduce those feelings of isolation. It can encourage them to bring their unique strengths to the team. So as Andre spoke about earlier on, we often view neurodivergence with a negative lens, but there's actually lots of unique strengths that neurodivergent people can bring to the team as well. Wendy, I'll come to you quickly on just with the concept of masking, because that can be something that neurodivergent players find really difficult and exhausting. So we can reduce their need to mask their neurodivergence. That can go a long way to supporting them to have that lifelong love of the game, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, because they'll probably be masking in so many different places, be it the supermarket, be it school, be it wherever they're in an environment where they're not 100% comfortable. But for me, it's just that belonging and making sure that they belong, that they can fully be themselves and they fully feel supported and understood there. And with all that in place, hopefully the masks will drop and they can authentically turn up at football and be themselves.
Great, thanks, Wendy. And like I said, we need to start looking at flipping the lens on neurodiversity. So if we have a player who has ADHD and we describe them as being disruptive or distracted, well, can we look at what actual strengths they might be able to bring in terms of their creativity, their energy, their hyper focused. The young player who I support, who's both autistic and has ADHD, is really hyper focused on a particular cartoon character. And we use that within our practices to assign him specific roles, and he really resonates and connects with that. So that's a real strength of his that he can bring. So looking at developing a thriving learning environment across training and match days, or hopefully this will just be bombarding you guys as learners with lots of different key tips that you can take away and go through. We'll not go into any detail on this. This is just some of the kind of the key ingredients of a thriving learning environment. We've spoke about loads of these already tonight. But if you're looking to create a thriving learning environment, reflect on what you do as a coach. Can you try and embed as many of these different things as possible?
Yeah, it's important to have practices that essentially look and feel like the game, because the practice is an extension. The practice is what you're preparing for, isn't it? It's for you to go and perform in a game. So you having that practice set up where it feels like a game allows it to transfer to that seamlessly. Now, for that to happen, obviously, you're going to need opposition. There's going to be the element of transition. It's got to be directional, got to have a variety of skills. And the one thing that we all want to do is score goals. And also then we're learning how to stop goals. So just really be mindful of your behaviors as well, how you react to certain things. Because I tell you now, a player could miss a sitter, and the first thing they will do is look over to you and see how you react. Well, that's going to tell them that you don't have confidence in them, so they wouldn't have confidence in yourself. So yourself as a role model is so important. And then obviously how your practice is designed is so important for that continuous learning to happen through practices and games.
Wendy, I'll just come to you first quickly here about using STEP to support players who are autistic.
I think we've touched on these things, haven't we, around the space, keeping it familiar. So we're keeping that setup familiar each time that the young people arrive, so they know what to expect. And we've talked about the safe space, the equipment, what different types of equipment can you use? So the emotion cue cards we've talked about, the fidget toys, or that safe space. And then even if you need anything else, auditory processing overload, or if you need visual impairments and you've got extra balls or anything like that come with the young people. And then the task, being really clear, using that whiteboard for the descriptions, and being really clear, concise and direct with your communication and your language, and ensuring that each young person understands if you've communicated it in a number of different ways.
Having loads of small-sided games where, they're consistently moving, they're getting loads of touches on the ball, they're involved in the session, but at the same time, they're able to step out using that safe space as well. So, you similar to autism, but essentially just modifying some of the aspects using the STEP principle.
If you are fortunate enough to have a co-coach or a parent who helps you out, these are some of the ways that utilizing your co-coach can be highly impactful. So if you do have a player in your group who might need a little bit more individual attention, it might be that you manage the group and your co-coach looks after that player, or vice versa. Utilizing your co-coach in setting up sessions or preparing the next practice, managing behavior and supporting difficult conversations. So try and be really intentional if you have the luxury of someone you might co-coach with, or a parent who might be able to help out.
Give them different names rather than subs, game changers, finishers. Make them really feel involved, even if they're not on the picture as the starting 7, 9 or 11 players, that they are going to have an impact on the game.
My thing is, there's a pitch set up on the side they're playing, and then when they're on, they're ready to go on, so they're not kind of stood off, not doing anything. And the last thing you want is, that kid going, can I come on yet? Can I come on yet? So if that allows, just having a little pitch on the side and encouraging the opposite coach to, bring their players in. So you're kind of watching, the game, but also you're maintaining the activity levels for the game changers that are ready to come on for you.
all that's left for me to do is to say, again, thanks very much for joining us this evening. We finished just in time for the second half of the Champions League, I think, so you can all go in and enjoy that. My thanks again to Loz, Wendy, and to Andre as well. And we hope to see you on a webinar again very soon.